here's how to use clam raises to build your glutes. If you're someone that is always using like the seated abductor machine there and you don't know of any other alternative, then clam raises are a really great option. So in today's YouTube video, I just really quickly wanted to take you through how to correctly do them, because I do see a lot of people doing these incorrectly, how to correctly do them, as well as how to make them harder as well, and a drop set that I'll be sharing with you right at the end, which I really like to include as like a finisher in some of my clients' workouts. So basic clam raise setup. Now, just need a floor for this. So all we're gonna do is have our knees kind of just slightly smaller than 90 degrees here, and our hips just kind of a little bit bent and just kind of tucked up. Now we want our elbow directly underneath our shoulder and just a nice solid position there. From there, you can have your hand on your hip, but to be honest, it makes zero difference whatsoever. If you're a beginner, you can actually have this other hand on the floor just to assist you a little bit. So don't mind it if it's just kind of hanging around there. But basically, from this position here, think about what you'd normally do in like a standard clamshell. It's like a rehab type exercise, okay? It kind of goes like this, all right? Now, a clam raise is kind of combining that clam with a raise off the floor, and we just allow our feet to come apart. So from this position here, we're extending our hip at the same time as pushing our knee down into the floor, abducting our hip and getting up towards the roof. So we're here, extend our hip and get up to that high position. So as you can see, we've abducted as much as we possibly can. And then from there, our feet are nice and wide. They're as wide as they possibly can. And we've got as much room off the floor as we've been able to achieve. So we're here, we're kind of nice and tucked. And the biggest mistake I see with this is coming up without extending your hips through as well at the same time. So we're coming up as high as we can and extending our hips through. So we're here to here. Hips back and really sit back into it, crunch into that position, extend our hips and abduct there. Okay, so that is your basic clam raise. Really making sure that as you come down, you're getting that full stretch on the floor. So imagine we're on our seated abductor machine. We're kind of doing a kind of similar thing, right? It's a similar movement. We're working those hip abductors, those upper glutes and that glute med, achieving the exact same thing on the floor. Now, downside is if you've got really, really strong glutes, you're probably gonna find those pretty easy. You're probably gonna knock out sets of like 20 to 30. And although that rep range can build muscle, if we're focusing on more kind of metabolic stress style training, it's not going to be building as much muscle as shooting for higher tension methods and those lower rep ranges. So we want to be making this exercise a little bit more difficult. My favorite way to do that is just simply using yoga blocks. So by using some yoga blocks, we increase range of motion. So one yoga block you place on your knee, the other one on your elbow, and automatically it means we've got a little bit more room to stretch that hip. We're achieving more range of motion here. So exactly the same idea. We drive our knee down into that yoga block, we extend our hip, get as high as we possibly can, and then return down, really getting as much of a stretch as we can now, okay? So here, and get that even bigger stretch. Here, even bigger stretch. Now you can, now just FYI, I tend to call these deficit clam raises because obviously we're higher up off the floor, we're going into a deficit. You can make these even harder by taking yourself into more of a deficit by stacking up like 2 yoga blocks if you want to. I've done that before. It's a really great method, but you've got to make sure that you're someone that does have that range of motion and you can really stretch that hip, get all the way down towards the floor. So hopefully you've got a good idea about how to perform clam raises, how to make them more difficult by adding a deficit. And now this is where our drop set comes in, our mechanical drop set, which I really briefly mentioned at the start, a way to intensify these if you want to. So we're going to be using clam raises as a form of mechanical drop set. So for that, you're just going to start with your yoga blocks, perform your reps to failure on each side. Once you've hit failure, then you get rid of the yoga blocks and then you continue with just on the floor. And then once you've got to fatigue on the floor, or you've reached fatigue on the floor, then you're going to use your hand for a little bit of assistance. So I'm going to show you just using a few reps of each. So we start here, Every time I'm laying on the floor, by the way, I always think, draw me like one of your French girls.
Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls.
Every time I'm in this position, it's like, draw me like one of your French girls. Probably shows my age. Anyway, so here, getting that full range of motion all the way up. So imagine I've reached failure on that side. I'm then gonna turn around and continue. Let's say I've done 15 reps, okay? I'm then gonna get rid of that. I'm then gonna do the exact same thing. So obviously I'm in a mechanically more advantageous position just by taking those away. Once I've reached failure on that side, I switch to the other side. Now, I come back to my original side. I'm going to use my hands to help me on the way up, not the way down. So I'm overloading that eccentric a little bit. So on the way up, I can push and control, push and control, push and control. So I'm just at this point, wheeling out a handful of extra reps on each side, switch over, and then you are done. Now, if you're not blowing by the end of that, if your glutes are not on fire, you're probably not doing them correctly. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. You've got a good idea about how to correctly perform clam raises, how to make them harder, as well as the nasty little drop set that we've just included in there. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's YouTube video. As I mentioned in previous videos, we're just really giving you some tools in your toolbox at the moment, looking at exercises more from a 30-foot view rather than going into some deep science and anatomy on them, giving you some ideas that you can take away, integrate within your own training right now to get better results. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's YouTube video. If you did, hit the like button, and remember, do not miss a video again by hitting the subscribe button, and we will see you next time.